In May of 2010, in the small village of Xingshan, located on the outskirts of Mudanjiang, a city in China's northeastern province Heilongjiang, the sister of two men who'd been missing for a number of days walked into the local police station. Her brothers had seemingly vanished into thin air several days earlier, and the disappearance was being investigated. The sister wanted to show police some text messages she'd received from one of the brothers' phones, which had her convinced something was very wrong. The brother had written that he had accidentally slain his elder sibling after pushing him during an argument, and so had left the village. While that was disturbing enough, she was more concerned about how the message was composed. It used correct grammar and punctuation. The brother who supposedly sent the message was practically illiterate, barely able to write his own name by hand. The sister was convinced the person who sent her the message was definitely not her brother, and the sender didn't want anyone looking for him. Looking through prior text messages sent by the brother, the police agreed that the message was suspiciously well composed. They also noticed that the newer messages often mentioned another villager, the former local doctor, Su Hong. The older of the two brothers, Liu Xiuyun, had been reported missing by his younger siblings on April 27th. He was 65 years old, and working as a cook on a construction site. He didn't turn up to work one morning, and very concerned due to his age, his family reported his absence to the police. 3 days later, the family returned to report that another brother, Liu Xiubin, was also missing. The family hadn't been able to get in touch with him to ask if he'd seen or heard from Liu Xiuyun. 20 years younger than the other missing brother, Liu Xiubin was having domestic issues with his wife. She had left the home, and the rest of the family assumed he'd gone looking for her. Now, unable to get in contact with him, the family realized he too was missing. Police went to search the home of Liu Xiubin, but saw no evidence that he'd left the village, finding money, along with his identity card, still in the home. The last person to see both brothers alive was the villager messages being sent from the phone of Liu Xiubin made reference to Su Hong. The police had already spoken to the former doctor when the missing person reports were originally made. In the small village community, little went unseen or unnoticed. It was common knowledge that Su Hong had borrowed money from Liu Xiuyun, and the messages being received went out of their way to make it clear that she'd settled the debt. The police felt that the messages being uncharacteristically well written, and now mentioning the last person to see the two brothers alive, was a little too coincidental. They returned to the home of Su Hong to question her once more. The police asked her about the last time she saw the brothers. She explained that she had only seen them to settle the debt she owed, and they left. She allowed the police to look around the inside of her home, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Before they left, the police, still suspicious, asked if they could see her root cellar. When Su Hong responded by telling them she didn't have one, the suspicion grew. In small rural Chinese villages, a root cellar was pretty much a necessity. If what she was saying was true, her home would have been the only property in the village without one. Making out they were going to leave, the officers looked around the grounds of the home to see if she was lying or not. They soon found a manhole someone had attempted to cover up, and the smell coming from the area told police it was being used to store something other than vegetables. Lifting the cover, they immediately saw what was emitting the odor. Someone had filled the manhole with a combination of manure and rotting garbage. Su Hong had lied about the root cellar, and the police wanted to know why. They began the grim task of clearing out the foul-smelling manhole to find out what was being hidden. Seeing what was happening, Su Hong came out of the house and tried to stop the search. She desperately attacked the officers who tried to restrain her. As they dug further down, removing the manure and garbage, the smell seemed to get worse. It wouldn't be long until one of the officers spotted what was very clearly a pair of human feet. Moments later, investigators pulled two bloated, decomposing bodies out of the cellar. The faces were still recognizable, and they were identified as the missing brothers Liu Xiuyun and Liu Xiubin. Police arrested Su Hong, but they weren't finished. The manure and garbage went deeper into the root cellar. It didn't take long for them to find a full set of human bones that had clearly been there for some time. Police asked Su Hong who the bones belonged to. She didn't try to hide anything. She coldly told them they were the remains of Bi Xueying, her sister-in-law, who disappeared 5 years ago. While being questioned on suspicion of 3 homicides, interrogators brought up the name Yan Bingtao, the brother-in-law of Su Hong who disappeared in 2003. Without showing much of a reaction, Su Hong casually admitted that he was another of her victims. Born in 1970, Su Hong was the eldest child of the family, and had spent the majority of her life living in the small, unremarkable village of Xingshan. Her parents were farmers, who toiled to give their children the best life they could. Taking after her parents, the young Su Hong worked hard in her education, and at 16 years of age, after graduating middle school, gained admission to a vocational health college in the nearby city of Ning'an. She graduated at age 20 and opened a small health clinic in her village. This effectively made her the first port of call for any of the villagers suffering health issues. While she had previous ambitions of working in a hospital in the city, she decided to stay in her home for a man. While in middle school, she fell in love with another student named Wang Ye. Unlike Su Hong, he didn't care much about his education and was content to be a farmer. Not long after Su Hong opened her health clinic, she married Wang Ye, despite objections from her parents. They believed their daughter was marrying down, and the differences in the educational backgrounds of the couple would create problems in the relationship. Her parents' concerns quickly became a reality after Su Hong and Wang Ye were wed. He would cheat on Su Hong frequently. The rumors of his various affairs spreading round the small village community like wildfire. Feeling humiliated and betrayed, Su Hong still tried to save the failing marriage and became pregnant. She convinced herself that having her husband's child would change him. Unfortunately, she was very wrong. Shortly after the birth of his daughter, Wang Ye left his wife and child, running away to the province of Zhejiang. Su Hong maintained the hope that one day, Wang Ye would return to her and his daughter. However, 2 years after they were abandoned, Su Hong found out that he had started another family in Zhejiang and didn't have any plans to return. The news crushed her, but she had no other options but to raise her daughter herself, while working at the health clinic. Her younger siblings helped her out where they could, but they were also starting their own families, with their own children to raise. Eventually, her brother and sister left the village after finding work in Zhejiang. As is common in China, the children were left behind to be raised by their grandparents. Now Su Hong not only had her own daughter to look after, but also had to help take care of her nieces and nephews. And while her position as village doctor earned her respect and appreciation from the locals, a small health clinic in a poor rural community brought little financial rewards. To earn more money, she managed to contract 30 acres of land, which she farmed with her aging father. Ever since she discovered her husband had started a new family, people in the village had noticed a change in her personality. Su Hong had become colder, more abrasive, and didn't hold back in showing anger. With the combined pressures of running her health clinic, working the farmland, raising her daughter, and the other children, her personality change became more pronounced. In the winter of 2003, the younger sister of Su Hong returned to Xingshan from Zhejiang. She had come back with her husband for the Chinese New Year. However, Su Hong saw that something was wrong. She noticed scarring that her sister didn't have before leaving the village. Su Hong interrogated her about how she'd received the injuries. The sister admitted that since they moved to Zhejiang, her husband had begun drinking heavily and was playing around with other women. When she complained about his behavior, she would get a beating. Tired of the abuse, she asked for a divorce. Her husband Yan Bingtao, in response, took the extreme step of cutting off his own little finger in front of her. What Yan Bingtao believed would be seen as a grand, romantic gesture of commitment to his wife actually terrified her. And now she was desperate to get away from him. Su Hong helped her younger sister leave the village without Yan Bingtao knowing about it. Once he realized his wife was gone, Yan Bingtao went straight to Su Hong. He threatened her with a knife, but she refused to back down and give up her sister's location. Her brother-in-law then said he would harm his own son if she didn't tell him where his wife was. Su Hong, filled with anger from the memory of her own failed marriage, attacked him. She picked up an empty beer bottle from a table and smashed it into the head, face, and neck of Yan Bingtao, ending his life. With Yan Bingtao lying dead in her home, a panicking Su Hong turned to her father. She told him what she'd done and didn't know what to do next. Without any hesitation, he went to his first child's home with his trailer and an oil drum. He loaded the body of Yan Bingtao onto the trailer and told his daughter not to think about it anymore. He would take care of everything. He drove out into his farmland and disposed of the body. No trace of his son-in-law would ever be found. To cover for his disappearance, Su Hong and her father told people that Yan Bingtao had gone to find work in another province. She came up with the idea of sending his family messages from his phone to convince them of the story. Su Hong and her father never talked about the incident again. Her sister was so happy to be away from her husband, she never questioned what they said. In 2005, Missing her 2 young children, the sister-in-law Su Hong returned to the village. Su Hong was taking care of her younger brother's 2 children, to allow him to stay together with his wife, in Zhejiang. The younger brother given Su Hong 14,000 RMB, almost $2,000 today, to support his children's upbringing. At first Su Hong was happy to see Li Xueying. The two got on pretty well as sisters, and it gave her a break from taking care of the kids, but the relationship soon changed. The mother of Su Hong walked into their home one day and saw Li Xueying sleeping with another man. To avoid the embarrassment of a confrontation, the parents of Su Hong decided it was best to ignore it. Su Hong attempted to follow her parents' wishes, but anger built up inside her. Her sister-in-law fell ill with the flu during her stay, and turned to Su Hong for help. Despite her feelings of hatred to the woman who was cheating on her baby brother, Su Hong treated her in the family home as if the relationship was still normal. Things changed drastically when Li Xueying asked Su Hong to pay back the money that was given to her. The sister-in-law claimed that she'd had trouble finding work in Zhejiang and needed the money back. Su Hong told her she'd spent it all. It had gone on food, clothes and tuition fees for the children she was looking after, as it was supposed to. Despite having 2 children, Li Xueying had never taken care of them, so couldn't understand how the money could have been spent. She called Su Hong greedy, saying she only wanted to keep the money for herself. Su Hong had all but given up her own life to take care of her siblings' children, alongside her own daughter. She was also looking after her parents, and splitting her time between working on the farmland and as the village doctor. To be called greedy by the woman who was cheating on her younger brother pushed her over the edge. While her parents were out one evening, and her sister-in-law was still trying to get over her flu, Su Hong decided to act. She put Li Xueying on an IV and told her to get some rest. As her sister-in-law was sleeping peacefully, Su Hong placed a rope around her patient's neck. She pulled the noose sheet fashion tight, and choked all the life out of Liu Xueying. This time Su Hong didn't turn to her father for help. She dragged the body of Li Xueying outside and threw it down the root cellar. She was now the only one in the family who went down there, so she was confident no one else would discover it. To explain this absence, Su Hong told everyone that Li Xueying had run away with another man. Again she used her victim's phone, sending out text messages to family members to explain the disappearance. Even her brother would believe her story without question. It was at this time Su Hong began filling the root cellar with manure and garbage, to both hide the smell of the body decomposing, as well as making it so no one else would want to go in. In the years after, both parents of Su Hong passed away. She was left having to raise 4 children by herself. This, combined with the work she was doing on the farm, left her little time to keep her medical certificates up to date. She was forced to give up her clinic, but would practice privately and illegally out of her home. And while her siblings helped out by sending as much money as they could afford to help Su Hong raise the children, she had little left to support herself. Her situation worsened when one of the children developed an illness that was beyond her ability to treat. The family now had extra medical bills, for which they didn't have the money. In desperation, she turned to the Liu family, who were one of the wealthier families in the village. They made their money through farming and other businesses connected to that. Su Hong approached the senior member of the family, Liu Xiuyun. Liu Xiuyun was long divorced and lived alone. At the age of 65, he took on a job as a cook on a construction site, just to have something to do with his time. When Su Hong asked for a loan, he was happy to help, but not out of the kindness of his heart. People in the village were fully aware of her financial struggles. Liu Xiuyun told her if she couldn't get the money to pay back the debt, then as a woman, there was something else she could do. Feeling there were no other options, Su Hong did what she felt she had to do for the children and would give in to the old man's carnal demands. She tried to bear the lustful desires of Liu Xiuyun, but the deal was soon amended. One evening, he came to her home in the mood to extract a payment from her, with his younger brother Liu Xiubin in tow. The elder of the 2 brothers told Su Hong that Liu Xiubin also contributed money to the loan, and she needed to pay him back as well. The younger brother was more than happy to have the same arrangement as Liu Xiuyun. Up to this point, Su Hong had managed to cope with the disgust and humiliation she felt every time the 65-year-old Liu Xiuyun violated her. But this was too much. She decided she needed to bring an end to the arrangement. On occasions, the aging Liu Xiuyun had failed to perform due to his advanced years. When he next came to her home by himself, Su Hong offered him a pill she said would help him. The former village doctor told him the pill was Viagra, so he wouldn't have any issues. Liu Xiuyun, too excited by the prospect to question it, happily swallowed the medication. The pill was actually a strong sedative. Su Hong kept the old man talking long enough for it to take effect, and soon enough Liu Xiuyun was in a deep sleep. Just as she had with her sister-in-law, Su Hong placed a rope around the neck of Liu Xiuyun and choked the life out of him. She wrapped the lifeless body in a blanket and dragged it out to the root cellar, dumping it down the manhole, where it joined the bones of Li Xueying. The next day, before anyone had a chance to realize Liu Xiuyun was missing, she called Liu Xiubin, telling him to come see her that night. This time, she crushed up some of the sedative pills and dissolved the powder in a glass of water. Liu Xiubin drank the water when offered and soon passed out. Su Hong once again used the rope to end his life, then wrapped the corpse in a blanket, and Liu Xiubin became the third body in the root cellar. She then spent the next days covering the corpses with excrement and garbage to mask the smell of decomposition, and buried the brothers. Only when the police first came to speak to her about Liu Xiuyun going missing, did she start sending the messages from the phone of Liu Xiubin. And it would be those text messages that would eventually expose her. After confessing all to investigators, Su Hong spoke of having the best night's sleep she'd had in years. She claimed hiding her guilt, and the fear of being exposed caused her to suffer from insomnia, and she required medication just to get 2 hours sleep a night. While many people in the village were shocked in finding out about her activities, some were not. Ever since Li Xueying and Yan Bingtao vanished, there had been rumors and suspicions about what really happened to them. In fact, some of those rumors were spread by her third victim, Liu Xiuyun. When Su Hong approached him for the loan, he told her that on the night Yan Bingtao disappeared, he saw him go into her home with a knife but never saw him come out. In her confession to police, Su Hong claimed that being betrayed by her husband forever changed her. She claimed she never allowed herself to enter a romantic relationship with anyone else again, Wang Ye being the only man she ever loved. She also talked about her ex-husband's betrayal, cultivating a deep hatred of infidelity inside her. She believed that those who cheat on their partners deserved death as punishment. When talking about Liu Xiuyun, she said he was often unable to get aroused. When this happened, the old man blamed her, and she would be beaten by him. She also claimed that, at some point, she was pregnant with his child, but the birth never happened. Su Hong admitted she didn't regret taking the lives of any of her victims. In her eyes, they all deserved it, for their own actions. The only thing she felt regret about was no longer being able to raise the children. In January 2011, Su Hong went on trial charged with the intentional homicide of 4 people. She pleaded with the court to sentence her to death and carry out the execution quickly, so that the pain and suffering she felt could come to an end. She would have to wait for just over a year to get her wish. In early 2012, Su Hong finally got what she wanted and was executed by gunshot. Her daughter and the other children she took care of were moved out of the village, away from the gossip that would have inevitably followed them, and were left with other family members. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And hope to see you again for the next dark tale from the Middle Kingdom.